Attention, American Commando. You are surrounded and there is no chance for escape. Proper medical attention.
So it's a new year and Microsoft is shedding its skin, laying off 10,000 people within and around many of its gaming divisions, such as Xbox and Bethesda, likely in preparations for an economic recession and a list of other reasons, with big companies like Amazon doing the same. This information comes directly from Jason Schreier, an investigative journalist at Bloomberg, who's done a fantastic job so far exposing many of the issues within 343 Industries, such as the technologically bankrupt tools used to build Halo Infinite, which we've just looked at in the last video, but more specifically the mishandling of this franchise and Infinite's development crisis. Now, a lot of channels on this platform are still trying to process Microsoft's action to cut off many so-called talented employees within 343 as it ventures off to pursue Activision Blizzard for $69 billion, exactly as it said it would a year ago.
Worrisome news, Microsoft slashes 10,000 jobs, including at Xbox and 343.
We are at the end times for Halo, the end times.
But you feel the need to cut the jobs of game developers, of engineers, the hard-working people that prop your company up and help to keep you afloat, that innovate in exciting new ways and are basically the ones that have the ideas in the first place so that you can then go and run away with a majority of the profits. Fuck you.
A lot of this has blown way out of proportion, with well-known channels yet again overreacting or providing clickbaity titled videos. I know people losing their jobs is a terrible thing, but this franchise has been a colossal failure in the hands of this studio for over 10 years now. This studio have consistently under-delivered, and Halo Infinite is practically the worst project this studio have put together. I don't know these people personally, so I share no sentiment with these job cuts. So can we just drop the fantasy act, because at this point it looks real fake. This is the same disingenuous fake behavior that's got this franchise where it is today.
I think it erodes trust with the community.
These are professionals at what they do, so they're most likely going to find work anyway. Exactly like Colby Payne, a contract campaign level designer for Halo Infinite, who practically left a few months after the game's release. To put this into perspective, 10,000 jobs is about 5% of its entire workforce, which is nothing, considering Microsoft just hired around 40,000 people last year. So this is just trimming off the excess. But when it comes to 343 Industries, which is consistently lacking in any manpower, it's currently removed over 100 employees. That's roughly 10% of its workforce. Now, most of the staff cut from Infinite's development team are reportedly from the campaign, animation, and art design team, with probably more in other sectors. They're expendable. The current project engine is so broken that it severely limits your creative freedom and abilities, which means you're going to struggle to produce fresh new content. This whole project has brought no real return in investment. The Slipspace engine, according to your own staff, is a broken joke, built by an incompetent studio who can't detangle their own bullshit. If it were up to me, I'd scrap this project entirely and move on to your next installment. There's a ton of speculation around the size of this studio's workforce, ranging anywhere from 400 to 1,200 employees, including outsourcing. That's a lot of core staff working on this game. Keep in mind, 5 other developers were also selected to assist in this game's development. And the game's ending credits list is fucking huge. This goes on for 26 minutes. That's 3 times longer than Halo 3's ending credits. So I'd assume that the game at this point has been touched by over 10,000 people to actually build the game. And I'm damn sure Bungie's work environment wasn't anything close to that, with the high turnover rate of employment at 343 Industries. It's really hard to care when somebody leaves this studio, since they haven't done this franchise any justice, literally prostituting this IP out to a huge list of contractors and developers to clean up their mess. 7 years of development, $500 million, and what they've produced practically doesn't compete with what we were getting 10 years ago in every aspect. There is nothing anyone can say to convince me that the sole team within 343 Industries have done a good job here and even deserve to keep their jobs. I'm not talking about your contract workers, I'm talking about the sole team within 343 Industries. That comes down from the CEO, who you can clearly tell didn't give a shit about Halo, down to development leads, senior leads, project managers, supervisors, transmedia, programmers, designers, engineers, everything. I would love to see a vidoc on this bullshit. and that doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon. There's people in this studio who've piggybacked off the hard work of contract workers who even then were on an 18-month agreement. It's a gross misuse of company finances paying these grifters to work on a project currently performing this bad, and one they don't seem to care about or even understand. You cannot continue to maintain a staff who have consistently underperformed in over 10 years. This is a long time coming, and I'm surprised it's taken this long to make these changes. I don't know what the in-house team were doing for 7 years of this game's development, considering it was clearly contract workers doing most of the heavy lifting. This is all contractor effort, and when you look at the actual people within 343 Industries, the core staff, things start to make sense immediately. It's shocking, and we'll get into that shortly. Piere Hintz announced that 343 will continue working on Halo, so you can expect Infinite to continue with its seasons nonetheless, because Microsoft have obviously invested way too much money in 343 to just collapse this whole project entirely. But again, that seasonal content will just be reflective of the same minuscule content you're already getting at the same constipated rate it's currently passing out.
Sensing launch in T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 2.
Throughout the years of 343's Halo, this studio have done anything but maintain this franchise.
I think the fundamental difference between Bungie and 343 is the way that they were formed. They're very, very different. Bungie formed very naturally, very organically, and grew into those big shoes and grew into Halo. 343 was brought in to work on an existing franchise, an existing universe with an existing fan base on existing hardware.
But your inability to safeguard Halo was a colossal failure.
This studio have successfully torn out the existing pillars and foundations of what made Halo the megastructure it was, only to succeed expectations on a grand scale, with elementary mod rock efforts that always collapse on themselves. You've spent 6 years building this slipspace engine, which doesn't even work, effectively making your job harder, slapping together a barren open world chore to play that feels lifeless because of your technological limitations. Now, surfacing rumors indicate 343 plan on using the Unreal Engine to build their future projects. Considering how much of your budget and assets you've wasted, it would seem as though you ultimately have no choice. One of the biggest IPs on the planet has to suck up their embarrassment and adapt to a free open source software. At this point, I'd strongly suggest you utilize the Unreal Engine because it clearly exceeds the slipspace mess in many aspects. There's far more support there with an extensive list of plugins to provide enough creative freedom to build yourself a real game. It's booming with tons of creative users with experience, and it's a free open source software. You also have neighboring partners like the Coalition who use Unreal to draw experience from.
If you remember in Gears of War, you fought the Locust Horde, where the Horde consisted of maybe like 5 or 6 Locusts. But now we can really build scenes containing hordes of creatures. And here we have over 100 creatures running around in real time using flocking technology.
Since Unreal Engine 5 came out, it's introduced nanite technology. Every object you see in computer graphics is built from planes of geometry called polygons. And the more polygons you have in your environment, the more detailed it will become, but subsequently take longer to render. And nanite technology essentially increases that to an infinite number without taxing your performance, meaning you can create some really detailed environments. And this would gel perfectly with Halo's lush green open worlds and natural environments. Considering you can now work with different biomes, create environments with flowing rivers, or manipulate the visual story any way the series needs to, effectively providing infinite possibilities. And if you look at the examples on screen, it's very possible to replicate Halo using the Unreal Engine. The only problem here is you need to employ the right talent, people who can replicate the Bungie era style formulas and processes that gave Halo its unique flavor amongst other shooters on the market. You need to build on what made each of these games unique and fun to play. Otherwise you'll just end up with another lifeless AAA bullshit demo. Now, cuts in these divisions basically confirm any future projects outside of just campaign DLC may take longer to deliver or are outright just cancelled completely, like the recycled content you see on screen. Weapons, animations, or factions from Halo 5. Yes, they're down that bad they are recycling future content. It may also take months to see other wacky innovations materialize, and what you see on screen are just desperate Call of Duty inspired travesties that have no business being in Halo's sandbox and would probably break the game anyway, if it isn't just returning features which should have been in the game at launch. Bigger additions like campaign DLC, which was probably Joe Staten's plan to redeem Infinite's embarrassing campaign, will likely come to a halt. Campaign DLC was a conceptual fallacy that obviously never made it past the talking stage. Scrapping scrapping this idea, in my opinion, is a good thing. Because if you played the campaign, then you'd know just how creatively bankrupt this game's creative direction was, with some of the worst bull story arc I've ever seen, setting up this IP's future for the worst.
This is just one part of the Zeta Halo ring, the largest, most wide-open environment we've ever built. And we can't wait for you.
Ironically, it's the smallest world, offering only one environment to play on, with no mission select menu still to this day. The only story you have to offer here is again based off the same ridiculous delusion love story between Chief and Cortana, which you've dragged on for over a decade now. Your new faction is now a race on the verge of extinction because of this dumbass bitch who blew up their home planet. Your first female antagonist ever looks like a dolphin banged an elite. Forced diversity and women in positions of power that serve no purpose, juxtaposed by their complete emasculation and castration repeatedly of one of the greatest video game heroes of all time. I mean, look at this. A 7'2", 1,000-pound super soldier is tossed around like some fucking ragdoll by this giant ape who for some reason doesn't finish him off. The chief drifts off into a deep coma in space for 6 months with no food or water. And this is the first 2 minutes of the game. Who the fuck wrote this bullshit? And you can forget the flood, because without the gore or fear elements, thanks to the game's teen rating, this studio would turn this IP's main villain into a comical joke. The endless, somehow more dangerous than the flood campaign DLC garbage would have only propelled the series even deeper into its own bullshit. This is how bad your creative direction was. Awful storytelling, since they've tried to maintain this franchise. Halo Infinite is again a lifeless, semi-open world, chore to play, literally designed for children, courtesy of its teen rating, set to excuse its comically bad game design. And some pussy idiot in that studio thought everything in multiplayer needed to be canon, crafting some of the most stupidest bullshit I've ever seen in Halo, ever.
What exactly did Spartan Din put inside his head?
A banished AI. The first I've ever seen.
That anyone has ever seen.
Who dares to cage the mighty Aratus?
What the fuck did I just hear?